It's safe to say nobody loves war. It's a grisly and nigh infuriating clash of ideals and policies that banks on eating away at human life. It destroys ecosystems and muddles what's left into mincemeat. But of course, it's an interesting subject to chew on, as using war in stories can lead to very interesting points of contentions on the basis of human nature, as tropey as it may sound. Now, I'm not talking about entertainment that go into the problems of modern warfare like Vietnam or the World Wars. Instead, this is more a civil war that took place years ago in a fictional environment similar to the real world, and the boy caught in the middle who just wants to get his body back. Wow, you have to watch more anime. No, I'm talking about the war in Dororo. Dororo is what you call a kind of black horse of the season. It's a somber, gritty tale of a ronin traveling across war-torn Japan to retrieve 12 parts of his body from 12 separate demons alongside a kid named Dororo, this kid. It's part Monster of the Week meets Rurouni Kenshin, where everything is bleak and nothing ever seems to go right. And in a season containing children getting eaten by demons, and even the most terrifying of all, sleeping with your soon-to-be sister, winter seasonal depression is sure as hell on the rise. Now, what Dororo brings to the talk of war is the utmost effects it has on people outside of it. And yes, stories about civilians caught in the crossfire have been done in many shapes and forms. Grave of the Fireflies, In This Corner of the World, you name it. But Dororo is a pretty old property that's now in the spotlight again, as not a remake, but a reimagining. So you can argue the metaphorical statements of war sort of started with Dororo. And here's a weird fact too, the author Osamu Tezuka, the god of manga, is a descendant of a legendary Japanese samurai named Hattori Hanzo. So it comes to no surprise he made a fictional tale about samurai in the Sengoku period, of which Hanzo served his time in. Which means there is good reason to look at this show as a prime example of how to present the adverse effects that conflict can bring to people, inside and out. So let's go over today in a video I like to call Dororo, the Triggers of War. Time for a brief history lesson. Now, Dororo takes place in a pretty tough period of time for the Japanese, the Age of Warring States, the Sengoku period. Lords, or daimos, fight to preserve their lands, and along with earthquakes and famines, the state of the country was in constant turmoil, and many died in and out of combat. Whether it be from mistaken identity or mere coincidence, the bodies were piling up as the wars raged on to see who could rule the most territory. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was your most depressing human history facts. Tune in next time when I discuss about why there is a border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. Let's just say Bloody Sunday. Now, demons getting mixed into this time period is pretty outlandish to say the least, but do keep in mind that Dororo is told like a fable that can come from this part of history. Heck, Japanese folk stories were dated by around this point, and can be interpreted as what citizens viewed at that particular moment. So stories like Momotaro and Kintaro can easily have been based on real-life figures who took part in Japanese wars of the past. Naturally, Dororo is presented as such. It has violence and conflict as its running background, while the hero goes out destroying creatures that can be allegories of the evils that war can spawn. But demons are the least of Dororo and Hyakkimaru's worries, as he must also go against soldiers and armed militia under command of several opposing lords. They follow their orders down to the letter, and thus are a good cliff note to start out on. Let's look at a good example from episode 4 featuring an anime hallmark, the Cursed Sword storyline. A poor soldier from a noble family is forced to execute captured soldiers by a superior. He manages to kill not only the soldiers tied up, but his commanding officers as well, making his mark as a wandering murderer under the spell of a demonic katana. This story has been told 100 times in many forms of anime. Hell, it's basically a cliche. But the most interesting point is the underlying theme of post-traumatic stress. Mental issues inside the human mind is a gravely underestimated condition. It causes painful memories within the subject and can trigger horrific events that they can never recover from. This man is that said victim of the war he was most likely forced to perform in, and if he stops doing it, he will be nothing. Much like in the real world, soldiers are the ones who carry this burden, and while modern medicine and methods are helping many to look past this hiccup, ancient warfare had nothing of the sort. This brief story touches on the effects that soldiers do go through after their campaign is completed. For the sword wielder, he thinks of no other option than to keep killing. It's like a drug that is destroying him inside, and despite the pleas of his sister, who gave up her nobility and status just to see him again, he is unfortunately lost to the bloodlust. And I believe in an anime like Dororo, the old cursed sword archetype can help build that message. On the other side of that coin is Jukai, a man scorned yet looking for atonement. Jukai has an entire episode dedicated to him, and how the years of constant battle has transformed him. While someone like the brother with the cursed sword became lost to the madness of immortal conflict, Jukai found an alternative counseling method, building prosthetics to amputee people wronged by the war. He's a conflicted man torn by shame for crucifying wounded victims and being used as a torturer by a brutal lord. He has no choice but to hide his dark secret from others, in the rightful fear that all of his therapeutic deeds will fall on deaf ears. When Hyakumaru comes into his life, he plays the role of a father figure to the boy and tries to make him into a real human. Kinda like a Geppetto to Pinocchio, though if Pinocchio had 2 katanas in his hands and can slice demons like a slap chop. Jukai represents the parts of post-war healing that is necessary to save one's soul from tearing apart. He won't be thanked for his Samaritan work, but as long as he can help people get back up again after falling, he will devote his life to see it through, no matter if demons scour the no man's lands. But all the creatures come from somewhere, and the one who released them all was Hyakumaru's biological daddy. He is a catalyst as to why these events have transpired to happen. While Daigo at this point in the show can be just seen as a son of a bitch who condemned his son's flesh and humanity to forces of evil, his label as a lord does mix things up a bit. Like I said, the daimos were constantly at war with each other and desired power over anything. Rich crops can be more important than an army, and Daigo took measures to secure that with 12 demons. It not only fits well with the history books, I mean, daimos did do some pretty nasty things to keep their lands uncontested by the opposing factions, but Daigo represents another horrible atrocity: the political corruption, a distortion of facts, or an anxious feeling of doubt in their leadership. Paves the way for countries' divides. Daigo is a very selfish individual who only matters in the results, not the terms that lead to those results in the first place, even to the point of sacrificing his own newborn son. Don't be expecting any happy Father's Day cards from that kid, dude. These 3 are the main conductors of the conflicts that affect the basis of the story and its morals. The soldiers and leaders create the chaos that muddies the waters and unleashes hell across the fields of combat. In contrast are impoverished citizens that want to protect the ones they care for no matter the cost, like Mio. But sometimes doing what needs to be done can be a double-edged sword, especially for women and children in the conflict of war. Mio is a flower girl, and no, not the dainty kind that throws flowers at weddings. This is more the type that goes to sexually exhausted soldiers and pays them with their body for food. Man, this show is so family friendly, isn't it? Despite her job as a lady of the night, she provides a local group of orphans the supplies they need in order to one day operate a rice field. But unfortunately for them, it's only a dream. Thus comes the most depressing part of the war argument: the drastic measures common folks must take to survive, and how sometimes it can be a fruitless undertaking. Prostitution, forced labor, and even robbery. Common sense is abandoned, and it's a fight for survival. The children are the very first to be altered, with most of them missing arms and legs. For Mio, she must act as the protector of the weak, and thus must offer her purity so that she can keep the orphan's dreams from dying out. Cause without dreams, you can't sleep soundly for a brighter tomorrow. When Hyakumaru comes in, she's anxious and afraid, which makes a lot of sense being that he is a man and she's inclined to offer her services for nourishment. But instead, Hyakumaru falls for her based on her singing, a coping mechanism that she speaks out to bear the humiliation she has to do every night. It's a tragic love story that, in this time and place, was never meant to bloom. This builds into a depressing conclusion that happens many times in many confrontations: collateral damage, and death to people who just wanted to live. And this heartbreaking horror snaps our main character into a blind rage. Thus, we must look at our last important character analysis of our war piece, because the most ugliest battles lies within the confines of the human spirit. Hyakumaru starts off as a mindless killing machine, because without his body parts or even pain receptors, he can efficiently slay monsters without dropping a sweat. But each demon he slays brings him much closer to his humanity, and when a new piece is realigned with him, the more he has to fight the urge to act like a monster. Nothing quite hits the nail on the head quite as much as the aftermath of episode 6, during his clouded display of slaughter where he's referred to as a beast in a cave. A war inside of himself has commenced, and we are unsure if the beast will come out or a man will take his place. Each time a fragment to his identity is recovered, a new challenge is awaiting him, like his nervous system teaching him of his shortcomings and weaknesses, or his hearing that reduces him to a baby by the mere sound of crackling ash or rushing rainfall. And this type of war is something a lot of people deal with on a daily basis. A phantom war of the senses that echoes far from any battlefields. It can happen in day-to-day life. The abstract battles of the mind is definitely the most complicated to describe in point form, and it requires mental fortitude to block it. Voices in your head, or that itch that seems to never leave, are symptoms akin to mental or psychological disorders. It is the main core of what makes war possible, and Hyakkimaru is now beginning to understand it, even if he doesn't fully comprehend it. Cause honestly, true war comes from within. The triggers that can allow a daimyo to sell his cherished blood to devils and lead people down paths of sorrow and heartaches. The first great wars always start within a person's subconscious and becomes a reality when they deal the first strike against a separate conscious being, escalating into, you guessed it, a state of armed conflict. The Sengoku era of Japan is a good example of how natural impulses can ruin the fabric of decency, and setting a fictional tale of depression and hardship like Dororo in the scenario is a perfect way to discuss human nature in its most upsetting form. It's a show I think, as it treads the fields of dirt and wheat, can illuminate and project real-life issues that need to be examined and talked about. It's not just another cool samurai popcorn fest like Samurai Champloo or Rurouni Kenshin. It's a story that not only represents the battles of inner and outer conflicts in warring state periods, but as a pure example of what we can all become and what can transpire in bloody, merciless wars. For when we leave the damp caves of the soul, will we become a human? Or the very demons we'd fought against? Thanks for watching this examination on a show you should all be looking out for. But please tell me, what are your thoughts on Dororo so far? Comment down below and please hit that notification button to catch my uploads. It's your bra man taking a walk through golden fields of wheat.